Welcome everybody to Product Coffee. My name's Jason Brett. I'm the host here, and what we're going to do here today is we're going to dig in on some characteristics that we've observed of great product managers, of outstanding product managers, people who tend to rise and stand out in their organization and team. Because what Product Coffee is here for is to help all of us through community be really super impactful product leaders who are helping our companies to deliver massive value to our customers and to each other as well. So I want to introduce a couple of folks, and before we get over to Jay, I want to cover a little bit of ground and thank our sponsors. We've got Product Coffee is free for the community to join, but there's a lot that goes into producing these programs, and I want to thank Method, which is a digital software and development, as well as a design strategy, customer experience, and digital transformation strategy agency based in Charlotte, but with worldwide presence in Atlanta, Denver, New York, and London. Has been sponsoring Product Coffee since the very beginning, and I want to thank Method for that continued support. And Jeff's here as well from Method, and Method is, full disclosure, is also where I work. We kind of found each other through Product Coffee, and so it's just been kind of a happy synchronization. And then Pragmatic Institute, formerly Pragmatic Marketing, has been sponsoring Product Coffee and Product Camp for over a decade and has been a part of our community. And when we started Product Coffee, August of 2020, they were one of the first ones to jump in and say, yes, we will absolutely support this. We're all trying to figure out how to move through the pandemic. Let's support the community in this way too. So thank you to Pragmatic. If you're interested in exploring especially some team-based, is where I find the greatest value in Pragmatic Institute training. They've got great product management and product marketing training that really helps to align the team on a common vocabulary and a common framework for getting the job of product management done. So check out Pragmatic Institute, tell them that Product Coffee sent you, and thank them for supporting us as well. And finally, Feature Upvote, which is an application that lets you collect feedback from your customers, recommendations and suggestions for how your product can be better or how you can better serve them, and you can interact with them. There are a lot of tools out there to collect that voice of the customer research, but there isn't one that I have found that is as easy to implement and as inexpensive as Feature Upvote. And they provide the software and our ideas forum at productcoffee.com/ideas, where you can make suggestions about topics that you'd like us to cover here on Product Coffee, vote on them, and we go to that as on an ongoing basis to find out what's on your mind and what some of the most important topics we might be covering are. So thanks to those sponsors. We're going to welcome my good friend and former boss, Jay Henderson, who is Vice President of Product Management at Alteryx. And I'm going to let Jay speak a little bit more eloquently about what Alteryx does than I do. But Alteryx is a data analytics firm that uses AI to uncover and understand business data. And I'll let you say a little bit more about that, Jay. Welcome, and thank you for joining us, Jay.
Nice to meet everybody. Glad to be here. I think this is going to be really fun. This is a topic I really love, but just to introduce Alteryx, it's about a $600 million company, just north of 2,000 people. So, it's kind of squarely a mid-sized tech company in my mind, growing 30% year over year. So, sort of growing at a nice clip against a big number, which is fun to do. As Jason said, we make analytics software. It's sort of a pretty interesting model. The bulk of our products are actually on-premise desktop solutions. A big part of the reason I joined was to help bring them to the cloud. I think if you had told me that there was going to be a $600 million business growing 30% was on-prem, I probably wouldn't have believed you before I got here. But there's a bunch of dynamics in the industry that sort of allow that to exist. And there's some things about the way the product works that lend itself to on-prem software. So, it's not crazy that this thing exists in the way it does. We're fortunate that we've got some really passionate customers. The NPS scores are through the roof. They are usually in the mid 50s to low 60s NPS. which for me has been a real pleasure. I think in my career, I've managed some products that had, um, negative NPS scores, very negative NPS scores. Customers have formed angry mobs with pitchforks, torches, coming after us over them. So I'm in a pretty fortunate situation in that the business is really good and stable and healthy, but there's still a lot of transformation that we need to lead as we continue to try to scale. So it's fun. I've worked at a lot of different sized companies. I've been at startups that were 0 to 10. I worked at IBM for a number of years with Jason and some of the other folks on the call. I like this mid-sized company. To me, it's a really fun and good size. Um, Maybe some context for the talk we're going to have. There's about 100 people on my team, so that'll give you some context for some of the advice I'm giving and sort of how I think about it. So I've got a couple layers of managers underneath me, and a pretty big, broad team that's doing a lot of different things. That's not all product managers. I've also got design and research and documentation and localization and accessibility. So, it's a healthy mix of different types of folks, but the bulk of those folks are product managers.
Yep. Thank you, Jay. And yeah, I didn't realize you had 100 people in your organization. Good God,
Well,
we
but
were
I mean, if
big
you
at
met on realize
IBM, but
when we were at Acoustic, it was 80 people under me,
yeah, I
right?
guess
Which,
so. Yeah,
so it's like it's not that much bigger a group.
yeah. I guess you're right. So uh, before we kind of get into what you've observed, let's talk about your career a little bit. And one of the things we've observed pretty routinely is that very few people. It's an emerging trend now. It's gotten interesting, but very few people set out to get into product management. But you've landed in product management through the course of your career. Tell me about how this notion of product management got on your radar in the first place, and now you've stuck with it for quite a while and have grown your career in a product management capacity. Tell us, how'd you find product management? What is it
Yeah.
about product management that's made it the place for you to manage your career?
Uh, this is like one of my favorite stories to tell, and I'm not sure if I've even told you this story before, but I basically got into tech and product management over free lunch. So I was an accountant, and not even like a glorious type of accountant. I was a cost accountant, which is pretty much the most boring type of accountant you could be. And I was in my early 20s, and there was a flyer like on the like bulletin board that said, come to this meeting, we've got free lunch. And like when you're 22, like this doesn't take much to lure you into a meeting. I was like, oh, pizza, great. And it turns out we were rolling out SAP, one of the first big organizations in the U.S. to roll out SAP. I sort of wound up learning a bunch about SAP, becoming an expert, running the East Coast deployment for 3Com of SAP, and that was sort of the big transition for me into tech, where I always kind of had a passion for computers and applying them to business, and that was a big part of it. From there, it was a little bit of a meandering road. I've had a lot of different roles in technology companies. I started off doing technical marketing. Then I became a product manager at a small company in really a hybrid role that was doing both product management and product marketing. Spent a bunch of years as a product marketer. Eventually landed in a product strategy role. And then, have just kind of moved back and forth between some different types of product roles like product management, product strategy, and product marketing. And I love all three, and all three have been really fun. I think ultimately product management tends to be a better defined role across different companies you go to. I think, product strategy is a luxury when you get to a certain size, but you can still do a lot of that as a product manager. And product marketing, I think, is depending on where you work, such a radically different role. And sometimes it's amazing and awesome. And other times people don't really understand what it's supposed to do. And, it doesn't give you the influence that you want across the org. So for me, product management sort of has the right balance of sort of leadership and strategy and execution, which I really love. And, I'm having a lot of fun doing it. And, I love being a product manager.
Cool. And thanks for sharing that. So, When you think about that experience and how you came into it and what you've learned over the years, and now from your executive perspective, leading large product organizations, when you're explaining to someone in the organization what product management does when they don't already understand it, because a lot of people don't understand exactly what it is we do, what function, how do you explain the function of product management within an enterprise like IBM or Alteryx or Unica?
Yeah, I mean, look, in the end, it's our job to define the and prioritize the problems that we want to solve in the products. Um, and it's our job to articulate those problems in a way that the organization can understand and rally behind. I think those are sort of, for me, that's a lot of what I come back to. There are a lot of different types of experts in your organization, right? You've got technical experts who, are on the engineering team that really understand the technology. There's lots of people who want to claim to be the voice of the customer and to represent the customer. For me, the key for product management is taking all of those inputs, defining the problems that you want to solve, prioritizing those problems, and I think a lot of times there's a tendency to want to say, "Oh, I'm the voice of the customer," or "I represent the customer," and it's true, but sort of, a lot of times I don't use those words because I think lots of other groups want to self-identify as the voice of the customer. So I try to focus on the thing that is sort of easy to not have to argue with, right? Which is sort of like, yeah, I take all that input. Our teams take that input. We help articulate that in ways that the rest of the organization can understand, and then we help prioritize and actually make decisions about what we're going to go try to accomplish.
I love how you frame that around the problems, not the features, not the technology. Yes, those are important parts of solving the problem, but the fundamental objective is to articulate and prioritize the problems that we're going to go solve. I like how you said that. So when you're thinking about that role and what it means to be successful, solving problems is something that's pretty hard to measure success on, especially in the short term. So when you're looking at what a successful product management looks like, how do you identify that? How do you measure success in product management?
Yeah, for me, a lot of it ties back to what you're trying to accomplish as an organization or company, right? So to me, product management is being successful when it advances the goals of the overall organization. And I guess the reason I frame it up that way is I think different companies are going to be at different phases trying to accomplish different things. And so, what success looks like at a small startup trying to go from, $0 to $10 million might look really different from a company who's at 600 million trying to get to a billion. But, to me, we are stewards of the products, which, are the main thing the company's trying to do. And so, a lot of times I view the product manager's success tied to the company's success. I think the other angle to think about is, how are you helping the customer? And oftentimes if you frame it that way, there's good, thinking in my mind that if I solve the problems for the customers in the right way, that should lead to the company being successful and the product being successful.
So there are many layers of measuring that success, but ultimately it's being able to tie those efforts back to contributing to the success of the company in whatever measure is important at that point. Which that brings us to a topic that I know is near and dear to your heart, is really kind of understanding how to align and focus as a product manager. And before we dig in on that, though, I want to do one more kind of foundational piece that will help us with some context with the conversation. And I asked you a couple times as well to think about some products that are out there on the market or that you've encountered or that you personally use that you think or even companies that you think have had a pretty profound impact on the world and delivered success when you're thinking about the problems that they solve and how they've impacted the world? Who are some companies that you can identify that have brought products to market that have had a profound impact on the world or on you or on your career or in your sphere of view?
Wow, this is a good question. Let me give a recent example. And Jason, this is one you and I've talked about before. I think um, the product that's probably changed what I do, the most over the last year or year and a half is Otter AI.
Yes.
Um, it's funny, I'm a terrible note taker, right? I'm good at a lot of things. I'm bad at a lot of things. One of the things I'm really bad at is taking notes. One of the things Jason suggested to me was to check out Otter AI. And, it doesn't do anything complicated. It's basically speech to text. And so instead of taking notes now, I just I'll record a meeting and then, that thing spits out the notes for me. And it's been really transformative in terms of my overall day-to-day workflow and kind of, how I process and follow up on things. And it's really just, it's dead simple, right? You just hit record, it spits out the transcript. And, particularly when my boss is assigning me action items or, I'm talking with a customer and want to remember. Jason also gave me a good hack where you can actually have it up during the meeting, watching the transcript. So if you're not paying attention in a meeting and somebody asks you a question, you can go back and look at the last few seconds of what was said and figure out, what question you're being asked. And, to me, it's so simple and just elegant and has had a pretty transformative impact in just, my day-to-day life.
I should probably go out and secure them as a sponsor of this program.
Yeah.
Because I do recommend that product a lot. It's fantastic.
Yeah.
They don't have spell checks on you, but they are pretty accurate on spelling. And going back to Jerry's question as well, you're able to go back and fix mistakes that it makes, which sometimes is important, sometimes it's not. But anyway, I don't want to get down on a Otter infomercial, but it's a great example of a product with profound impact. And so if I think about how it's had profound impact, we talked about you talked about some problems that it solves that are kind of unintentional. I don't think they ever set up to say, "Hey, we're making a product that's great for people who get distracted in meetings."
Yeah.
I don't think that was their core problem statement, but it is an extra kind of thing. If you imagine the product thinking that went into that, and think about product managers that you've worked with. You're going to like this little twist. Think about product managers that you've worked with in the past, either directly or indirectly, and encountered. And the ones who have been responsible for bringing those kind of really impactful products out. What are some of the characteristics that you see in those leaders that are able to help facilitate products like that coming to existence and to market?
Wow, what a great twist to add there.
Yeah.
To me, if you think about, kind of the passion I just talked about Otter with, right, and talked about how it really transformed, it's quite simple, right? And a lot of times those little things that are simple and transform your work are kind of, those are the types of capabilities we're talking about. Having such a huge impact on your customers. To me, from a product manager, how do you do that? Well, it requires expertise, right? And it requires empathy with the customer. And I think being a product manager is really an interesting blend because you're trying to be an expert in your product, an expert in your customers, and take what you know about the things your customers are doing with your product and find those little features that can be transformative. I think that's really hard to do if you're not an expert in the product. And I would say as you become a product leader, deciding how you want to approach maintaining that expertise and is really hard, right? Because in oftentimes becoming a leader means a little less about the product. You spend a little less time in the product. But sometimes you're spending more time talking to the customers, talking to the customer's boss, right, or the user's boss. And I think that can provide some different perspective. But to me, all of that, sort of breakthrough innovation, the simple elegance comes from being the expert in the customers and being the expert in the product and marrying those two things together.
So and so being an expert in the customers, being expert in the product, being expert in the problem space really allow you to identify some of those opportunities for innovation. That reminds me of a conversation we were kind of having offline yesterday, as a matter of fact. And so I want to shift the conversation into kind of more of a leadership area of topics. So those are a combination of hard skills and soft skills. But as we start to shift from being an individual contributor to really starting to show leadership and rise above in the organization, are there some hard skills that you have observed that the best product leaders you encounter tend to have in common? Hard skills specifically here. And that could be technology specific or task specific skills.
Ooh, I feel like I must have said something really interesting yesterday. You're trying to get me to repeat. I have
I'm
no
going
idea
somewhere.
what it was.
I'm going somewhere next. I'm just
Okay.
prefacing with the hard skills.
Gosh, the hard skills. Look, I think there are lots of good hard skills around the discipline of product management that you can acquire, right? And one of the sponsors is Pragmatic Marketing. I've taken a bunch of their classes over the last, probably 20 years, right? And they're good, and they're good to even repeat often, right? And I love sort of just their foundational little grid that helps orient you around, like, well, here's what I'm going to do, right? And for me, at least, it was a really profound moment when somebody explains to you and teaches you about your job. And it makes you realize, gosh, there are not enough places, even today, where I can learn about my job and learn how to do my job better. But I do think that as you think about that grid and some of the skills that doing the jobs on that grid require, like, there's definitely things you can learn about. Making sure you're doing win-loss reporting and making sure that you're writing user stories, and those skills are all important to understand how they work and to have the mechanics down of the functional role.
Yeah, and the reason I wanted to ask you about that is to tease out a couple of things that jump to mind as particularly important hard skills to focus on mastery of. But when it comes down to it, and you and I have had lots of conversations about what makes a successful product manager, and I know for you, so often it really comes down more to soft skills than hard skills.
Yeah.
But you can't excel at soft skills until you have a foundation of hard skills that qualify you to do the job. And doing some of those better certainly takes you to a level that's really important. But let's talk about the soft skills. Because I know this is an area that you're really passionate about. When you think about the leaders in your past organizations, those folks who have shown up not only on your radar, but on the radar of your leaders, people, like the general managers at IBM that are responsible for, billion-dollar businesses and multi-billion-dollar businesses. What is it about some of the most impactful product managers that they're able to do on the soft side that really elevates them in the eyes of their leadership as well as their peers and helps them create more impact for their customers as well?
Yeah. A few different things, to me, when you have young product managers or new product managers, a lot of the thing I'm trying to coach them through is to be thinking about the business and not just the roadmap, right? Or not just the next release. I think intuitively, when you start your first product management job, you're like, okay, cool, I got to figure out what's going in the next release or the one after that. Or I just talked to a customer and they need these 10 things. I think that all of that's super important, but But as you get more senior, and if you really want to advance your career, in my mind, kind of one of the things that really sets folks apart are the people who can think about, well, gosh, I have a $10 million business now, and the company wants to grow it to 100 million. And to get from 10 to 100 requires a very different set of capabilities than the 5 features the customer I talk to wants. And it takes a special person to, one, think about that journey from 10 to 100, but also to balance, because I probably need some of those 5 features the customer asks for. So how do I, balance the care and feeding in the release with, the things that are going to propel the business forward. And so that's an area where I spend a lot of time sort of mentoring or coaching younger product managers, because I guarantee you, whether it's somebody like me or the CEO or the general manager, they're thinking about, how do I go from 10 to 100, or 100 to 500, or a billion to 5 billion, whatever the next kind of wave of growth you're trying to fuel. And they care about making that customer happy with the 5 features. So it's not that that's not important. It's, how do I balance those two things? To me is a really important skill and something that you have to learn. Maybe the other big thing I always like to tell people when they want to advance their career, start caring about the things I care about. And it's maybe very it's a very self-centered way to think about it, but care about the things your boss cares about. And while he, or she might be sort of saying, okay, you're in charge of this product or this part of the portfolio. To me, the great product managers care about more than the narrow job function they have, right? They're trying to figure out, well, how does my product fit together with the other products in the portfolio? And, how do I sort of know that about the other products, so that if the job at the next level comes up, I'm the logical choice, because I already know about, kind of not just my own product, but the other products in the portfolio. To me, that sort of, ambition and self-awareness of the other things going on in the org really can help propel your career. And sort of, even in my own case, the way I got, the job running product management for a big portfolio was like, oh, well, I was already going around talking to customers, not about my product, but about, all the things in the portfolio. And so I was the logical choice to be the person that led it.
And that goes back to the comment that you made much earlier on. You were focusing. It's an extension of it, focusing on problems, not features and the product specifically. It's what are we out there to solve, and and I know that has been really important to you. And one of the other things that I think I've observed, if I look at some of the folks that I've worked with on your teams as well, is it's not just the people who align themselves and understand the things that you're focused on. It's the people who can communicate those things and help others around them, who can kind of expand your influence, not just by doing things and speaking the right language, but by really helping others within the organization adopt those same priorities and gain visibility into those same priorities.
Yeah. I mean, I think it's in some ways it's hard to have that perspective, right? Because, when you're a product manager, your product or the area of the product you're managing feels like the most important thing for you to be successful. And I think it's really easy to sort of, you put on your tunnel vision and you go like, I'm going to do everything in the world to make my product successful. And that's super important. But sort of saying like, oh, like, my boss is trying to help launch this new product that's in another part of the portfolio. If that's what he cares about, like how does my product fit in with that? What things could my product do to help make that successful? Because it's important to my boss, or it's important to the company that we move from, a one product company to a multi-product company, or that we, create a beachhead in this new market or expand the opportunity. So it's maybe not something that seems super obvious to a product manager that, they need to care about more than their product.
And that brings us to another thing that I know you've dealt with quite a bit as well, and it's that mindset that makes it much more palatable and possible to do one of the things that product managers often hate to do, but often have to do. That's killing products. Steve Jobs is famous for saying, that strategy, the essence of strategy is deciding what not to do, or deciding what to say no to, or what to stop doing is another variation on that. And so when you're looking at your portfolio and identifying those things that maybe we shouldn't be doing, do you have some examples of, or an example or a thought on where stopping doing something has had a profound impact on the organization that you're serving?
Yeah. Certainly while we were at IBM, we killed off a lot of products. But for me, probably the best example I can think of is actually when I started Alteryx, probably the first decision I made within the first 3 weeks was to kill a product. First of all, in some ways it was a little bit easy. I was the new guy. I didn't know anything about anything. And I didn't have a lot of personal investment, in the couple of years they'd spent building this product called Analytics Hub, which was, sort of meant to be this, next generation, back-end server platform. The problem with that was they've been working on it for 2 years. They got, another 2 years ahead of them to get it where they wanted it to be, and to where they could actually start to phase out the thing it was meant to replace. The problem was that sort of while they were building this next generation thing, it just diluted the focus we had. And so, we made the decision to kill it, but it let us redeploy about 50 to 60 engineers back into, kind of the core products that generated all the revenue. And it had a very profound impact on the business, because we were able to, focus on fixing some bugs, making the product a little more stable and adding some new features to these products that customers love that generate all the revenue. We had other bets we were placing around innovation. So I think we felt good about our ability to still be innovating in the market and driving products in adjacent categories. But it was a hard decision, but was a tremendous relief for everyone that sort of we had this huge influx of resources from the product we'd killed off, and B, that just sort of we were much more focused around what was really important to the business.
Thanks. And there's some commentary going on here in the chat as well. Jessica pointed out IBM just sold off Watson Health, and we were part of the Watson marketing organization that was divested from IBM as well. So killing takes on different forms. They didn't actually kill those products, but they did remove them from their own portfolio and put them in someone else's.
And that it's curious, right? I'm curious how you felt about it. But when we carved out the Watson marketing business from IBM, it felt great, right? Because sort of there were years of IBM signaling that this business wasn't important to them, right? It didn't matter that it was over probably $500 million worth of revenue at the time, growing really nice. They just didn't care. It wasn't important. It wasn't a focus for them. And so, I think we had all of these product managers with passion about the product, and a larger organization just kind of going not that important. And so when we carved it out, it felt great because you're like, wow, this is now what the company does. There's so much focus about it. And we're ready to go, take on the world and conquer the industry. And for me, it was a very liberating experience to have that happen.
And and as we see, that carve out from IBM and the Watson Health carve out from IBM, we talked about this in one of our side chats as well. As a result, IBM appears to be entering into a new phase of hyper focus on growth through being a systems company again, as opposed to an applications company. They spend a lot of time really focused on applications like marketing and healthcare and analytics, and now it's really more around the systems expertise with the Red Hat acquisition, and they seem to be entering a phase of focus that I'm pretty bullish on IBM right now. I'm gonna open up the floor to questions because this isn't a podcast where Jason and Jay just kind of talk all day. This is a community event, so I want to get some folks in here. So if you'd like to, if you've got a question or an observation and just want to wax philosophical, throw your hand up or jump in here a minute. I do want to before we pivot over to the audience, I do want to ask you another question, and we've kind of touched on it a couple of times, Jay. But one of the things that I know is really important to you from a leadership perspective is you spend a lot of time mentoring and coaching product people in your organization to help them carry through your career. And there are some that you invest more time in than others, and it's quite intentional. And so what I'd really like you to think about and share with us for a minute, as an executive responsible for a lot of things, how do you decide? What are some of the things that you see that cause you to choose to invest more time in some people and really kind of lean into their careers?
It's a really good question. Because in some ways it's a little bit of like playing favorites, right? Like it happens. I don't know what to tell people, right? Your time is not infinite, and so you do like pick some folks and invest in them. I would say, it's not that complicated, a set of calculus, right? I invest in people I like. I invest in people who are ambitious. I invest in people who do good work. I invest in people who I think will benefit from that investment. A little bit. I'd also say, I'm always thinking about a few different things, right? I'm always thinking like, what would happen if person X on the team resigned? Who are we grooming to be able to step into that role? And so, I'm often trying to figure out like, okay, here are the key people in the team. Here's what I do if that person left. Here are the people that, we sort of think are ready for the next assignment or ready for that stretch role. I'm also looking for people to put in front of my boss or put in front of the CEO where, it's going to make me look good that, oh, this person's smart and awesome and doing great work. And, I look like I'm a smart guy for hiring them or for being, the person that puts them in front of the CEO. I'm also looking for people who can just take work off of my plate, right? So how can I, who can I delegate tasks to? Who's ready for a stretch assignment? Who can fill in for me because I'm not available or I'm too busy? So as you think about like, well, how can I make sure that I'm the person that you would choose if to go to that meeting or to substitute for me? And that's where kind of the earlier point around knowing more than your product, like, hey, if you want to sub for me in a meeting, you got to know about all the products in my portfolio. And so it's that, that's part of why I suggest those things. But, I guess I'm looking for people who bring a lot of passion to the job, people who bring a certain skill set. And that skill set can kind of be a lot of different things, but I am thinking about how do I build complementary teams. You don't have to be great at everything. And in fact, I often don't want people who are great at everything. I want people who are experts in things I'm bad at. And that can be a pretty mind-blowing idea and thought for someone, right? When I was early in my career, I'd get reviews and they'd say like, oh, well, like, here's the things you're really good at. And I'd nod my head. And then they'd say, here are the things you're really bad at. And I'd nod my head. And then they'd say, okay, what's the plan to get better at those things you're bad at? And for me as a leader, I had this moment where I'm just like, no, like I'm a really bad project manager, like maybe the worst in the world at project management. And like, I hate it. I'm not good at it. And I don't ever want to be better. You know what? We have like a whole team of people who are project managers to go do that stuff. And that's great because it lets me lean into my strengths. Right. And the people who are project managers, I think that like they're a special breed. They like that stuff. I hate it. And so what you really want to do is like, well, how do I get one of those matched up with, somebody who's great at setting the vision? And so to me, this idea of complementary strengths, complementary teams lets folks lean into their strengths and get much better at that. And so, hey, think about where are you creating your expertise? What things are you really good at? Sometimes it's vision. Sometimes it's understanding the technology. Sometimes it's you used to be a customer. So you are the proxy for the user. I think there's lots of different places you can focus as a product manager. You don't have to do all of them, but like, pick something and be good at it.
And you flirted with a couple of things there, and for those who know Jay, you know that Jay is quite fond of management by cliche,
Mm.
and there were a couple you kind of flirted with, so feel free to drop them in there at any point, because you've got some golden nuggets. I mean, there's no silver bullet, but
Yeah. Yeah.
the
Jason, silver bullets are only good for killing werewolves.
exactly. The but I do want to. I want to flip the script a little bit, and we talked about how you decide who you're going to lean into. But I know one of the other things you've done really successfully in your career is you've identified some pretty powerful mentors in your career, and you've aligned yourself to some leaders, both who are directly in your line of management as well as kind of adjacent to you, have really helped you on in your career. How did you go about it? Was there an intentional path? Was it luck? How do you find the leaders that you align yourself with to help yourself grow?
Yeah, it's interesting. I haven't had a lot of luck with kind of formal mentoring programs. Um, and IBM had some of them, and they kept trying to like match me up with some executive, and you'd have some awkward first meeting, and it I don't know, it always felt very forced. So a lot of the mentoring I've had in my career has just been like, finding somebody who is smart or in a position of power or influence, and approaching them and asking for advice when you need help, and picking their brains, and just having casual conversations, a little bit like this, even, right? For me, that's always been a lot more successful. But I will tell you, it definitely helps to have those people you can lean on a little bit, to have a sponsor within the organization, to have somebody be your patron. It definitely helps, right? And it's certainly, finding those people can be tricky, but creating those relationships is key, and investing time to create those relationships, getting to know the person. But what you'll find is that if you go ask, people like me, we're eager to help, right? We've got like time, and we'll carve out time for people that we think will benefit from it.
Great. Yeah. Thank you. And I think I'm going to pivot over here to David in just a second, who's got his hand up. TJ asked a question in the chat because it's kind of related here a little bit, especially related to filling out complementary teams. So if you're in an org of several hundred people, you got 100 people under your organization specifically right now. And keeping track of 100 people is really hard, and hundreds of people is really hard. So what are some ways that you've kept tabs on people in general, and their strengths, their preferences, their growth areas, and so on and so forth?
Yeah. I would say COVID's made it even harder too, right? I always feel like when we were in an office, a lot of what I did was like management by walking around. It's one of those Tom Peters concepts that you hear about, but like for me, that fits my leadership style really well, right? Bumping into people in the halls while they're getting coffee, and just being like, "Hey, what's going on? What are you working on?" That was a lot of how I used to keep updated around what was going on in the organization. Um, in bigger companies, that gets more complicated because you're not all even physically in one location, right? So I feel like at IBM, I got much better at creating those opportunities for casual interactions with people. I think Slack has been pretty transformative in sort of my ability to manage a big team. I'm often just pinging people, going like, "Hey, what's going on?" or like, "How was the weekend?" or "What are you going to be up to this weekend?" To try to create the opportunity for just casual interactions that can lead to building trust with someone, that can lead to better understanding who they are as a human. I think as you think about opportunities to sort of understand what people are good at and what their preferences are, like there isn't a huge substitute for just getting to know someone. And you can give yourself opportunities to do that in casual settings and formal settings. So we do product reviews on a monthly cadence with some of the executives, right, which is an opportunity both for my leaders to present, or for them to have a delegate present, right? And we often use those as sort of ways to try out someone to see how they're doing with presenting and how they do with some of the questions that get asked. I'm often dragging folks into a meeting when they are the expert on something to, I always think like one of the things I'm always trying to do as a leader is just learn from my team, right? They're way closer to all of the detail that's happening in terms of the product and the roadmap and the customers. And so, I'll drag them into meetings, sometimes with customers, sometimes for me to just understand like, hey, how does this work? Right. Explain to me more about, whatever the thing is that you're the expert on. And so, that those are some of the ways that you're trying to get a sense for what they're good at, where they maybe could use some coaching or some improvement.
And the important thing that I'd like everybody to understand about what you just said about all these advice and suggestions is we're talking to you from the perspective of a senior executive at a pretty large company, but these lessons and these concepts and these approaches, they're how you got there. It's not something that you started doing when you became vice president. You honed those skills over the course of a career, and I can tell you, just from a personal perspective and experience, one of the things that Jay does really well, exactly what he's talking about, but if you want to get it down to a cliche, Jay is a master at shining the spotlight on other people. And that gives people that he's nurturing along and helping along the opportunity to stand out in front of their leadership. And I learned from that when I was working with Jay to do the same thing with my teams and create lots of opportunities for them to be in front of the audience. So it's not about me, it's about the team and making sure that the team is getting celebrated and highlighted and having opportunities to grow and be in uncomfortable situations but come out of them looking good and so on and so forth.
And that, by the way, that doesn't come naturally to me. It's something I work at. I'm naturally a glory hound, right? Like I want the spotlight. I want to do all the amazing things.
I still have a magazine with you on the cover of it.
Yeah, exactly. So, giving the team opportunities and asking yourself sometimes like, well, hey, is this something I need to do? Or, would it be an opportunity for Jason or Kush or whoever to present? And what you find is I would also say as a manager, delegating didn't come naturally to me when I first became a manager. And that's another place where you kind of have to invest, right? Because sort of what made you get the manager spot or the leader spot is that you are a great individual contributor. And so like, it's good if you can manage a small team, you can kind of do some of the work with them, but eventually like, you just got to let go and hope that it comes back to you in a way that's good, right? And it's a very unsettling feeling for great individual contributors to say like, well, like, I don't know, I'm going to delegate this to Jason and maybe it'll come back good and maybe it won't. But it's part of where you start to go like, okay, I'm going to make an investment in Jason. He's going to do great work. And I'm confident that what I get back is something I can use and that will be acceptable and will get the job done. And that trust starts to be really important in how you decide to mentor people and advance their careers for, especially for me, at least like that trust thing. It's like, I just have too much to do. I need to hand something to someone and trust that what I get back will be good enough or, even knock it out of the park.
So let's shift gears over here and run over here to David Eckhoff. David, you've had your hand up for a minute, so thank you. You can rest your arm a little bit now, but you had a question or a thought. Go ahead and jump in, David.
Hey, Jay. You mentioned hard skills and soft skills before. One of the critically important soft skills is communication skills. One of the things I've observed over the past year is how challenging it can be to communicate about product and product processes and product updates to non-product leaders. What have you learned as a product leader about how to communicate, say, at a chief level or a much higher level of non-product leader?
It's a great question. I think there's a couple different places and ways to do that. For me, I think a lot about process, believe it or not, and I'm not a process guy, so it always feels funny to say that. But one of the great lessons about IBM is I learned where process can help and how process can help. For me, the alignment is a big theme that I talk about. How do we get aligned around what we're doing, and how do we get aligned around our strategy? How do we create ceremony for decisions we're making so that people know here's where, here's the meeting where we make this kind of decision. How do we have that ceremony so people know the decision's made, and then how do you radiate it across the organization? I feel like I grew a lot as a leader when I was at IBM because to operate at that kind of scale, you really do have to surround yourself with process. There isn't a way to avoid it. As we carved that out in acoustic, we had this amazing luxury to leave behind the process pieces that we felt were stifling or too much like filling out TPS reports. And choose. And then when I got to Alteryx, what I would say is like, it's a company that went from 50 million to 500 million and didn't put any process in place. And I think we're still trying to find our way. How do we create the alignment? How do we have the ceremony about the decision? And then how do we radiate that to the rest of the organization? We're still kind of working through that and building that. But that's really important, at a detailed level, right? Surrounding yourself with the process to communicate those details about, hey, what are we releasing this week? What's coming next week? And then I think as well as you shift to communicating to executives across the organization, keeping the message simple is really hard. One of my favorite cliches is like, I'm a big believer in reinforcement through repetition, right? So when I'm talking about our key product investment themes, like I'm going to like drill those into everyone's head. I'm going to stop people in the hall and I'm going to be talking about, hey, here are 4 big investment themes. Those things aren't going to change for 18 to 24 months. And we're just going to keep beating the drum, explaining to everybody, hey, we got 4 big product investment themes. So that when you start communicating the detail, they go like, oh, Jay was saying, big data fluency is an important part of the roadmap. And like, oh, we just released this cool new feature for Snowflake and Databricks. And, they're like, oh, I see, how those big investment themes connect into the tactical things that are in the product. And to me, sort of that hit them high, hit them low communication strategy works really well, right? If you can give them a simple set of things that they'll be able to memorize, 3-4 points. And then it helps them actually make sense of the detail as you go to communicate it.
That's great. Thank you.
We had a couple more questions come in on the chat, but I don't think we're going to have time to get to them all. I want to try to take a crack at one of them that Faith added just real quick in about 2 minutes, Jay, and then I've got an idea to kind of follow up on a couple of these others that came in from Jessica and some other people. But so Faith was asking about when you delegate and what comes back didn't work out, when it wasn't really what you needed, it wasn't good enough. So when you delegate it, is there a way that you set expectations so people can succeed? How do you clean it? Provide feedback that the result is not okay. That's a tough thing.
It is a tough thing.
But it happens.
Well, I mean, look, I think some of it comes back to who is this person and how do I feel about them. I often will delegate with enough time to iterate on something if it's really important, right? And good work takes time. There isn't really a substitute for that, right? Even when they're great people. So I will happily, give feedback to someone that it's not good enough. And I'll also lean in sometimes and say like, no, it needs to be more like this. And the more time you spend with your leader, like you will learn their style, right? And the style of the work they want you to produce. And I mean, Jason knows this about me. I have very particular desires around how I want my PowerPoint to look. And I want it to be good. I like, don't give me junk, and I have a particular style, how I want the titles to read. I want the titles to be the main conclusion on the slide, right? And so the first time you create something for me, there definitely is going to be some iteration because you're not going to understand my style. You're not going to know what I want. And so I'll build that in. I will tell you though, like that delegation, I'm if we haven't worked a lot together, or if I think you've got potential, I'm trying you out a little bit. And so One, I will lean in to help you make it successful and try to iterate with you on it. If you continually fail at it, though, I'm just going to stop giving you stuff. You know, like you won't get more tries at it. And frankly, you know, you if you're really bad at it, I may start trying to manage you out of the business. And that's okay, right? Like, what I would tell you is, for folks that I've managed out of the business, they're often relieved, right? They know they're not being successful in that role or in that job, and you know, sort of taking action sooner rather than later is probably one of the best pieces of management advice I can give you. You know, I think every time you move on from someone who wasn't working out, you're relieved, and you're like, gosh, why didn't we do that sooner?
Yep. Some great reminders there. And, you know, leaning into the statement that you made about really working with people and iterating things, I can tell you that one of the things that that I go back to and thinking about the time that we worked together is the number of times that we were facing something new, and we got on, and Jay and I didn't work in the same city. You're up near Boston. I'm down here in Atlanta. And we both traveled quite a bit. So very often working together meant getting on a Zoom call long before the pandemic, and co-working on things and literally working on a presentation together in real time and talking about why we were making the choices that we were making. And that's a skill that you can take from no matter what level of the organization that you're in, when you're learning to delegate, when you're learning to work with other people, working with your team members in real time, sitting down saying, hey, let's grab a room or let's grab a Zoom call and let's just work through this together over the next hour or 2 hours and get it where we want it to be together, so that you can get in sync on how you think and learn from each other. And that's something that I learned a lot with you as well. And it's part of your mode of operation that kind of answers the question of de-risking the concern that Faith was kind of talking about as well. Yeah. So, hey, Jay, I want to thank you for doing this. We're about 2 minutes from the top of the hour. We're kind of out of time, but you know, I linked over to Jay's LinkedIn, and I know he's a very open and loves to meet new people. So I'm just volunteering you to connect with people because I know you will anyway. And jump in our LinkedIn group as well. And I've got a couple of ideas. I'll follow up with you, Jay, on how to get back to some of these questions that got asked that we didn't quite get to. And I would invite everyone, I'm going to send a note to everybody who is here today as well and ask you to share with me who some impactful leaders that you've observed are, because I'd like to bring them on to Product Coffee as well to share some of their perspectives and experiences with everyone here as well. So look for that email from me later today, and hope everybody has a great week. Thanks again, Jay, and thanks everyone who was here, and we'll see you next time. Take care. Bye.